Linux OTC. Welcome to episode 10. We're your hosts. I'm Bill.
I'm Norbert.
I'm Leo.
Bang. All right, so here
Shebang.
we. Yeah.
Shebang. Yeah.
Oh,
we
it's
got to
going to
start the
be.
script with a shebang.
We
But
are
we don't have a
all.
script. That's the point.
I need everybody to strap themselves down. We're going to be talking about immutable desktops
And we
here.
lost half the audience already.
Why should we care about this? I mean, as somewhat production users, um, why would a normal person care about an immutable desktop? And would they care? Would they notice the difference? A normal person that's not thinking about writing their own FS table and getting into the Etsy directory and changing stuff in there. I mean, is it even an issue for those people?
Well, that's not actually. The word immutable doesn't always apply to these systems because, for example, in Fedora Silverblue, you can still edit your fstep because only /usr is read only. And I was looking into these systems and I ended up switching to it on one of my machines. I only have one machine with a dedicated GPU, an NVIDIA one, and I've been running Fedora on it, which has been fine. And I think I mentioned that NVIDIA drivers tend to work a lot better with the LTS kernels, and Fedora always ships the latest kernel. So I was trying to decide between moving to distro that has the LTS kernel, for example, Arch.
I don't know if we settled that NVIDIA worked better or
In
anything.
theory, because
yeah,
because
there
I
we go. All right.
because I am
It's
assuming
supposed
I've
to
heard
work
it
better.
works better. Let me just say that. I've not
Yeah,
been
yeah.
able to confirm that for myself. No.
That is correct.
assuming
Don't worry.
because-
Bill's got an entirely separate box to test all of this stuff on. That
I gotta
that's
build it,
because
though.
NVIDIA works so well. You had to totally separate box.
Yeah, he can blow up his system, so I don't have to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm assuming
Yeah.
it works better because NVIDIA cards are in production in a bunch of data centers.
Yeah, but they're not doing desktop graphics. I think
Yeah.
that's the disconnect. This is what people see. They see NVIDIA works better, but they miss the rest of the equation, which is just using the CUDA cores doing things like AI. They assume that also includes running Wayland on the desktop, and while it may,
It probably
does
doesn't,
always-
but it
yeah.
might have some correlation. It might cause it to be more stable.
That's
And,
not what Reddit says anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on how much you trust Reddit or how much you go or care.
Well,
I mean, that's what AI is based on, Reddit, isn't it? Just that's the learning models
Reddit
for
is just
OpenAI
AI
is
comments.
Reddit.
I'm convinced.
there
did-
are subreddits that are all bots.
Yeah.
All
I
the
don't
top
know-
level.
There's just a
don't
lot
remember the
of
name.
bots talking to each other, and
Yeah, I was
then
gonna
we're
say-
reading it.
Bots
All of the
commenting-
top level subreddits
posting.
are just bots. That's all that is.
So I was thinking maybe I should move to a distro that has the RTS kernel, which was my main contender was Arch, but because I'm looking for stability and I assume Fedora has a better tendency for stability, and I'm saying this as someone who has used both in
I was
the
gonna say
in the
also
past.
debatable.
Yes, but I'm not talking about packages breaking. I'm talking about not having to worry about updates because ideally I wanted to have a system where I can whenever I just happen to not use it for a long period of time, I can just do that and not have to worry about things breaking. And this is where the immutable systems come into the picture. I have been running Silverblue on it, but not upstream Silverblue. I've heard a few times about George Castro's project, which is called Universal, which are systems based on Fedora's immutable systems. So
Oh, okay, hold on,
RPM
wait. We
What's
gotta,
the
we gotta,
difference
we gotta
between-
come back. No,
Yeah.
we gotta go farther back.
I-
than that,
I
Bill.
will come back,
What
but
is
I
an
just-
immutable system?
Yeah, I'm trying
let's
to get there,
define
but
that.
just doing a U-turn in the process. And the reason I went in on trying the immutable systems in the first place is that I learned that Universal Blue has Silverblue images with NVIDIA drivers baked in, and that's a good thing because an immutable system is one that you install, and then you cannot modify the core system. And ideally, you won't have to, but maybe you want to, and you can. That's the thing. You install, for example, Fedora Silverblue or OpenSUSE Micro OS or Vanilla OS, and there's a few others, and it installs the system. And the idea is that the system stays the same throughout. Well, you get updates, but you don't modify package lists, and you don't install system packages.
You're not modifying individual packages.
Yeah, you can.
The updates are coming down as
it's the same as with Android. When you have an Android phone or even an iOS phone, you get system updates, system images, and those go onto a usually read-only partition. And everything you install, apps and you app data and files you put on the phone, goes into a writable partition. So this is the same idea. These systems have the /usr mounted as read-only, and whenever you do an update, it's sort of like doing a Btrfs snapshot. MicroOS does this. It creates a snapshot of your system, and it applies to the updates to the copy of the system. So you don't have to worry about libraries changing on the system that is running right now. So it's like...
So this is very much how macOS does its updates as well.
I think,
it pulls down an entire
and
thing
you know how
it in there.
On Windows, this is solved by... It downloads the updates, but only installs them when you reboot. But then you have to wait when you reboot. You can do this on regular Fedora, or you can just install the updates while you're running the system, but then some libraries might change that the running system, the running state of the system is not expecting. So that could lead to instability. So the idea is that you copy the system, but with Btrfs you don't have to copy the data. You just create an image of the system. You work the updates into the updated system, and when you reboot, then the updates apply.
So Fedora is leveraging Btrfs on the back end. I guess it makes sense that they would do that. They're using that anyway.
I think there's two approaches, either Btrfs or having an AB root when you have two separate root partitions, and it copies the contents of your current root to the other root, installs the updates on that, and then switches them up when you reboot. With Btrfs, you don't have to have two different partitions, just two subvolumes. And what's interesting is OS3 handles the entire system as if it was one giant Git repo. And to learn about this, I ended up having to learn how Git works. But that's a bit further ahead. Like I mentioned, OpenSUSE Micro OS, which is the immutable version of their rolling tumbleweed system, uses this Btrfs approach. Both OpenSUSE and Fedora use Btrfs as a background, but Micro OS goes all in on Btrfs and uses it to manage the images of the system. So you reboot into the snapshot. Silverblue doesn't use snapshots. What they use is OS3. So, like I said, it works kind of like a Git repository. When you clone a Git repository and go into it, all the data is stored in these binary compressed files that are hidden in a .git directory. And if you switch branches, because a Git directory, if you have an idea of how Git works, which I think I have an idea, you have various branches and you can switch between them. The way when you switch your branches, it looks like as if data is magically appearing and disappearing. It's actually uncompressed from these invisible compressed binary files and replaces the directory contents, the contents that used to be the previous branch, with the new branch. And so what I just described is I learned a few days ago how Git works in the background, basically. And all these compressed files have a long 40-character hash as their names. So when I went into the /OS3 directory, I looked through of the contents of the system itself, because everything is essentially happening there on Silverblue. It was just same. I looked into the objects directory and I saw a bunch of these gibberish hash file names, which are the files, because OS3 doesn't keep track of packages. it keeps track of individual files. So the idea is that systems are not kept the same on the packages list level, which already happens on the regular distro. They are bit from bit identical, ideally, if you don't change them. And the more identical they are, the less likely that something unexpected happens that would happen on a heavily modified system, and it wouldn't happen on a stock system.
So, over time, as you update OS tree, and things are replaced one for the other, do you accumulate a backlog of past updates, or is there some kind of mechanism managing the old data, or is it replaced? How is that happening on the back end?
It is handled exactly like if when you make changes to a file in the Git repo, and you can just roll back. You can see the changelog on the individual file level. So whenever I boot up, there's always today the latest system state and the previous one. So if the one that I didn't update and I boot into it and something is broken, I can always roll back to yesterday's version of the system. Or if I want to have more than two at the same time, I can pin system states. These are called deployments. So I can just pin previous versions into the grab list.
Okay, so that's not a lot unlike just a traditional Btrfs snapshot type situation where you can boot into, you can keep snapshots and you
Yeah.
can boot into an alternative snapshot if
Yeah.
you have an update that
Yeah.
doesn't work or
Yeah.
something.
Basically, it has your states of the system built into these directories, and I think it doesn't symlink them like NixOS does. NixOS does the same, but with just a bunch of like thousands of symlinks. You have everything in a store directory on NixOS, and it just builds your system by a symlink. It's kind of crazy. But in this with Silverblue, with OS3 and RPM OS3, I think it just creates directories and copies stuff, which is you can copy everything instantly, almost instantly in Btrfs. So while it doesn't utilize the snapshots, it does utilize Btrfs's copy on write feature, which is if you create a copy of a file, but the contents are the same, it doesn't copy it on the disk. It just creates like it's like a link, but it works as a file. So these are two files. They point to the same data on the disk.
Okay, so to recap and simplify, what we're talking about here is basically an operating system that behaves a little bit more like what we're used to with the phones, where you have a very distinct system layer and then a distinct application layer, or the user-facing application layer, which is kind of what we're used to. We didn't get into that much, but we're kind of used to that with the phones, because you don't really, I mean, you kind of do if you shoehorned it in, but you don't really have this with the phones nowadays. You don't have the concept of opening a file manager and double clicking on an application sitting somewhere and opening, or double click on a file sitting somewhere and then it opened with the default application. We've kind of obfuscated all that away into a concept where the applications
You can kind of
Kinda.
think of it a little like, remember back in the day, well, I guess you still kind of have to do it if you want to put on ROMs and things like that, the rooting process to be
Yeah.
able to get to system files.
right.
And in the iOS side, you got a jailbreak to be able to do things in the background and actually change those things. That's kind of, I guess, where we're headed with some of the immutability. You have to be able to can open it first, and then you can make those changes. And even then, it's pretty
But what
easy
if-
to roll back
what
from
if-
all that.
What if you can make the changes to your system even before you install the system? And
Oh,
this
yeah,
is,
yeah.
And this is where Universal
Declared
Blue,
a declarative type system.
Yeah, and not yeah, kind of, but not in the sense as in NixOS where you have a local config file on your system, and it builds it according to that. Because not long ago, RPM OS 3 received an update where it supports container image formats, the system being deployed like a container, being fetched like a container. And I'm not sure if I understand it, the technical details of it properly. But what Universal Blue does, which is not a distro, it's more like a meta distro, because they take Fedora Silverblue and other Fedora immutable images, system images, because remember, this is like containers in the cloud. You have a server, you have an operating system, and you don't run the applications on the operating system, you run containers. A container is like a static, everything is included to do the work you need box. For example, if you just want to run Nextcloud, you have Docker, you fetch the Nextcloud container, which everything you need that you need to run Nextcloud, and whenever there's an update, you just throw away the container and you pull the new version of the container, and you don't lose any data because your data is stored separately. Now, what George Castro came up with is applying the same idea to an operating system. So they set up a sort of build system on GitHub, when every day there's a new official Fedora Silverblue image, and there's also CoreOS, which is a headless version of Fedora Immutable. And they set up the automated system that takes the daily images of the system every time and reapplies the changes that they want to make to it. For example, replacing Toolbox with DistroBox, and installing things like HTOP and the NVIDIA drivers if you want that. And the build system builds the image and hosts it on their GitHub. And every day when I turn my system on, it checks for updates, pulls down the new image, and just applies it into my system. And,
Automatically?
Yeah.
So you're declaring
lot of
what you
bandwidth.
need.
Well, I'm not sure if it. I think it might just download the differences. I hope it just downloads the differences.
But
I'm
still,
not-
even if it is just
Yeah.
the diffs, that's a lot of data every day.
Every day. I mean,
Times the number of users.
yeah.
Well, yeah.
But the thing is
I'm
that
just thinking in like a single user
they-
kind of mode, but that's
they
a
are
lot of
host-
data, especially if you don't have huge amounts of bandwidth availability every month.
Well, on the user's end or their end, because for now they are just hosting it on GitHub.
No,
So
I mean
all-
on the user end, because
Yeah.
through every show I've been on, there's always a subset of users that say, "That's really cool," except I can't use that because I don't have unlimited bandwidth.
Yeah.
So
I will
I'm thinking
have-
of those people.
I will have to inquire about this on their Discord because I'm interested. I think just the differences are downloaded because it works like Git. When you Git pull in a
Sure.
repository, it just downloads the differences from the online repository.
But are you declaring on their server the things you need, and then it's creating a branch specifically
Yes.
for your system?
If you fork some of their stuff, you can do that. I haven't done that because for this machine, this is my workstation. I tinker all I want on my laptop, but I want my desktop to just work and not break. And this way, each update is essentially like a reinstall of the system, because it takes the state of the system on their end in the container image, and it mirrors that bit by bit identically on my machine. And I'm using their NVIDIA image, where they not only have the NVIDIA drivers built in, but they also have the kernel module precompiled in it, which you would normally have to build on your own system. And if maybe there's a problem with the NVIDIA drivers or the kernel that causes the kernel module to be unable to build, well, you would only find that on your regular system when you have already installed the updates, and right after the updates, before the update finishes, it builds the kernel module. But if it cannot build your module, you are not able to use your drivers. But this way,
So
the
you wouldn't
ultimate-
pull it at all then, because it
Yeah,
wouldn't build.
Yeah,
so
because the build system, if it's not able to build, well, then the entire build process for the new state of the system, the new daily image build fails, and the image is just not deployed and not hosted, and you don't download it. And this is not only true for their general images that you can use. If you fork some of their repos and set up your own build system, which is basically you just declare in a file the list of commands that you would want to run after you install it. You just declare the commands and it runs them for you when it builds it, so you can have just as much customization in your system as if you were tinkering with a regular system. But all of the package management is not done after you download the update. It is done before you download the update, all
I'm
in the cloud.
following you.
And this is what George calls the cloud native desktop, because it is the same model as for cloud deployment.
Yeah.
Your package management is not done on your system whatsoever. It is done in the cloud, and when the state of the system is, it doesn't calculate dependencies on your computer. It's all done in the cloud build process. And sorry if I'm talking too much, but this is just a very exciting thing. And when it is built, it is mirrored to your system. So even if it's not the stock identical Silverblue that everyone uses, or the what they call the opinionated spins, or the Ublue spins that they have that you can download.
So everybody gets their own branch, basically.
Yeah, everybody. I mean, it's not really a branch; it's more of a fork, as far as I understand, because it all works in GitHub and using Microsoft's GitHub. What's the word? Infrastructure. Yeah.
This is all interesting. It's fascinating. Okay, so
There is a small chance that things break in a case where the NVIDIA kernel module succeeds
Always
to
NVIDIA,
build.
isn't it? Every time. You're never going to get away from it unless you drop
Leo,
NVIDIA. Just drop NVIDIA.
You cannot expect any system to be perfect, and breakages will happen. But I'm fairly,
you can't even expect it to be close, Leo.
Yeah. But since I already trust Fedora and what they do, and
You
on top of that,
you just don't
there's
use NVIDIA.
Yeah. Well, right now I can't really afford to buy a new card, and I also like to have CUDA cores, so I'm not really worried about sticking with NVIDIA. Right,
and so I mean it's fine if you go in knowing that, I think, but there's so much of the NVIDIA supported, and then people that don't know better come in and think NVIDIA is actually supported, and it is.
Yeah.
I wish I had another X16 slot so I could throw an NVIDIA card in just to use for, the NEVC and all that stuff that it'll do, and the CUDA and all that, and then not hook my monitors up to it. Just use it for the.
I mean, if System 76 is comfortable enough with selling NVIDIA devices that run Linux, it might be fairly good at this point.
Yeah.
I personally haven't had any problems with the NVIDIA drivers while I was using it. I used to have some annoying screen tearing in XFCE, like in 2021, but throughout 2020 it just disappeared.
But you got to remember that System 76 only supports a very slim subset of cards, and they make their own kernels.
Yeah,
they do that for you, so that's taken care of.
They build their kernels
for their subset of cards. So not just any old card is what is, I guess, blessed.
Well, my card is old. It's a
1060. So is that something that System 76 ships? And do you use Pop! OS?
No and no, I think.
Okay, so
we're batting 1,000 right off the smack here.
But I've been using Fedora with GNOME on Wayland for more than 6 months, and it's also been. Right. But allegedly, there have been Fedora updates that where the thing is where the kernel module was broken. I just were fortunate enough to not update that week, and I guess I missed that. But using Ublue, their pre-built NVIDIA ISOs, I see it as a safety net for those kind of failures. And like I said, I already trust Fedora to build a system that is stable. And with this safety net, in theory, this is a more stable setup than if I was just using upstream Silverblue.
So is that the use case for this then? I mean, all this is all interesting technology and an interesting method of going about your updates and all that. But is the use case for this?
Well, I think the biggest use case
Go ahead.
is reproducibility, because if you want to deploy Linux on multiple systems, maybe dozens of systems, like in a classroom, and you want to have specific software on it. Now you can just pull upstream Fedora images, layer your needed packages into that, and the system just builds your images automatically, and then all of the computers can pull it down. Or maybe you can just host them on your local network, so all of the systems don't have to individually download the same updates again and again to just save on bandwidth.
So would this then I guess would you consider this to be better than having a system image that you just clone to a drive? And why would it be better than that?
Well, because like I said, the people call these immutable systems, but it's not a perfectly accurate term, because not the entire system is immutable. When you clone an image, for example, to a Raspberry Pi, I imagine everything is identical, or the files are identical, even the UIDs of the partitions.
And you can
I don't know.
part
But-
of the cloning process,
Yeah.
I guess, in a situation like that would be to
Yeah.
randomize the things that
But
need to be
with this
randomized.
system, you just create new partitions, or it does it automatically.
Mm-hmm.
And the installing the system is like pulling a Git repo. And /etc is writable, so I can edit my /hosts file. I can edit my fstub file. I added my mount points under /mnt for my for my drives that I use, and I could just do that. So
And the home directory is in var too. That's
yeah,
interesting.
Yeah. And so is MNT. But I think when it builds a system in the cloud, it even builds your etc directory, and when you update, it is also pulled. But the changes that you've made to that are layered on top of it. So on a regular system, you just pull the updates on top of your existing system. This way, your updates are worked into the existing base image, and your changes are reapplied. And this is in basically the systems are more identical to each other, and because they are identical, there's less of a chance of a bug happening that has to do with the state of the system.
Unless there's a bug in the thing that's identical
Yeah.
across all the machines,
Yeah.
in which case every machine has the bug.
Yeah, they call this minimizing drift. Let's
Okay,
say
right.
you install like a regular distro on multiple machines, or even Windows, but because you use them differently, you install different stuff, you generate different config files, and in Windows maybe registry files, entries and stuff like that. The systems, even though you are using the same operating system and you get the same updates, the state of the system changes. They change from each other, and that is what they call drift. As far as I binged a bunch of videos about this topic on George's channel, which I can highly recommend. And he was also on a very recent episode of the Tech Over Tea podcast by Brody Robertson, which I also highly recommend. That was where I learned about them having NVIDIA ISOs, and which got me to try it.
Yeah, because I'm coming from, I guess kind of an Ansible world. Or you can even throw Chef and Puppet and things like that in there as well, that take care of the change management for you, that do, I guess the point of those things is to reduce drift and to have the most identical system that you could possibly have, and to also manage the systems that do need to drift for specific reasons. Like you have a CAD department and you have an art department, and those machines can't, those machines don't need the same stuff on them, and so Ansible handles that with playbooks, and so you just run the playbook and it installs the things that you need, and the machines that ran that playbook are all, for all intents and purposes, right, identical.
I think George also mentioned Ansible playbooks that are potentially they will be able to be worked into this system.
Oh yeah, it sounds like
Yeah.
it, because you want the user software stuff to be
Yeah.
the same, right? Not the immutable stuff, the everything else. And yeah, Ansible can help with that as well.
I think the best and most commonly seen proofs of concept of this immutable model working are the phones themselves. Because when maybe you've been running your phone for a while and you want to do a factory reset. A factory reset, as far as I know, just deletes your writable partition, so you get a clean slate. But your read-only system partition, where the core system is not changed, maybe it's refreshed. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was gonna
No,
say.
I think you're right because they recommend that you do a baseband upgrade first. That you make sure that you've got the
Yeah.
latest OTA update before. So obviously, it's not erasing all that.
Yeah.
Because that image has been checksummed, and it will be
Yeah.
checksummed again before it's overlaid to start over.
Oh,
So you know what
I-
it is.
I think Git also checks some stuff, right? Because
Yeah, of course.
It literally,
Oh, yes.
it literally works with SHA hashes, and that's exactly what RPM OS 3 does. OS 3 itself. RPM OS 3 is the system that lets you layer packages on top of the system, which you can either do on your installed system or in the cloud declared before you build it. But OS 3 just pulls your update as if it was a giant Git repo. And that ensures that it's as identical as it can be to the intended system.
It'd be interesting to get Castro on here to sell this a little bit better. I'm not
Yeah.
quite so sure.
I would be up.
You gotta click. You gotta click like 4 links to be able to get an image to be able to do any of this stuff. So it's obviously not ready for the masses. But I mean, what is it? What will be the turning point that gets Fedora as a group to say, all right, we're done with the regular images. Let's just, instead of calling it Fedora Silverblue, it's now just called Fedora Workstation. What?
Well,
where's the finish line?
That means that
Yeah, I think
IBM Red
Silverblue-
Hat is recognizing that that's going to be the future
Well,
for Red
is
Hat.
it though? Because Fedora is fairly independent and community driven. So I don't know that it has to be Red Hat branded.
But it still has to be able to test some technologies that Red Hat Red Hat still wants to get value out of that project, and it's harder to reliably test technologies
the
that's
value,
not even on the same sort of system.
if
I
they
don't know.
decide to eventually rebase Red Hat Enterprise Linux on the Immutable version of Fedora, and if the regular Fedora is still around, the Immutable version of Fedora is kind of a product of people working on regular Fedora. So by having regular Fedora around, it benefits Immutable Fedora, and by extent, RHEL itself as well.
So kind of what you're saying is it's not the future. It is just a byproduct
Yeah.
of
Because
what happens in Fedora
What
Workstation.
is important is that when you layer packages on top of Silverblue, it uses the same Fedora repos that you would normally use. So Silverblue and Fedora, as far as I know, share the same repos. So it's just, they build the package once and they can deploy that package on both systems.
So, okay, so then let me change the question a little bit then. When is it that regular people don't even know that they're installing an immutable system? At what point does that
I think
happen?
we're already there with
Yeah,
this.
because if you
Is
don't
it?
open...
No, Ubuntu doesn't do this. Debian
Well, no,
doesn't do
but-
this. Fedora Workstation doesn't
Yes,
do
but
this. All of the big
unless-
players don't do this.
Unless you open a terminal and try to run apt or DNF, and then instead find that, you can only run RPM OS 3.
Well, no, I know that people would be oblivious to it. I'm saying, when is it that Debian is immutable now? When is it that Ubuntu or
Oh, boy.
Fedora or any of the big boys, when is it that they are just immutable first and then...
Immutable by default. I
Right,
don't know
right.
if that'll ever be.
So,
But I think for Fedora, it comes down to when the majority of the user base prefers that. That will be the point.
but how will
because-
they know? Because the majority of the user base gets what's off the front page, uses Fedora Server and uses Fedora Workstation.
I think there would have to be some sort of imperative where we need.
That's what I mean.
a
This is what I'm
system.
getting
Yeah.
at, right? Like, when is it? When is the cutover? When does Fedora say, okay, the
I'm not
immutable
sure.
one is the one, and that's when that's what we're moving forward with. That's our focus.
I
Difficult
just-
to imagine.
I just
Yeah.
went on the Fedora website. I click latest release 38, and what it gives me is Workstation, Server, IoT, Fedora Cloud, and Fedora Core OS. And out of these 5, only Core OS is, I think, is the only one that is immutable. Maybe Fedora Cloud is as well. But I have to... Yeah, Silverblue is just a footnote, and on the bottom.
Oh,
of the
it's got
website.
its own website. So
Yeah.
does Kinoite.
And there's
So,
actually
so when
two
does it
more.
get put onto the list? That's interesting. Another interesting question, I think.
this would make a good prediction for one of the next
Ah,
following
right.
years.
So when
Yeah.
2030? Is it 2030 that
I think
Silverblue
it's.
gets
I
its rightful
think.
place on the list?
I think it's more. It's. I think it's closer to 2025 than it is to
Okay.
2030.
Is that a good idea for Fedora to do something like that, though, or
Fedora
should
is
this
always
be
a-
something that people know that this is what they want, so they know to go and look at silverblue.fedora.project.org
I
or
don't
whatever?
think there's enough trouble in the regular Fedoras or any distribution without, getting way out of whack by doing all kinds of configurations that are non-standard.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think you really run into the problems that immutability is solving that often. Because you were mentioning that one of the purposes is to kind of keep tons and tons of systems in line with each other, and I think
Yeah.
Ansible does a pretty good job of that.
Yeah.
As long as you don't give people the ability to change things in like the USR directory or the Etsy directory, so basically, don't give people sudo access.
I guess the biggest part of this RPM OS3 model is that it checksums every bit of data of your system to make sure they're identical.
Right.
It's sort of a safety rail.
Sure. And so I'm thinking. So recently, I have had a Fedora installation on my main workstation desktop for a very, very long time, and alongside Linux Mint. And basically, what I use it for is I want to see if my workflow will work. If I ever decide that an Ubuntu base or a Debian base or just Linux Mint in general is not for me anymore, I want to know that I have an escape route. And so I've kept basically a Fedora installation that has kept pace with everything that I do in Linux Mint. So I'm very familiar with the GNOME workflow, and I'm very familiar with the software working in GNOME. And recently, though, since I got the framework laptop, actually, I've let that slip more and more. And so that left my desktop living on Fedora 35, not Silverblue or anything, just Fedora 35 workstation. That is it. And the other day, it was midweek last week, that I wanted to come back and actually start maintaining that. And so I had a question. Number one, do the Fedora 35 repos still exist? Because it was end of life in December,
Yeah.
and the answer is yes, they do.
Oh.
So I was able to do a full system upgrade, and I was like, great, cool. All right, so but now I need to upgrade versions. I need to go from 35 to 36, 37, or 38. And so I checked. When I opened up GNOME Software, it offered me 37, and I thought, well, if I do want to try 38, I would have to upgrade to 37 and then upgrade to 38. And so I found out how to do very specific upgrades. So you have to use DNF, and you can move to any version of Fedora that you want that is forward. So I could choose 36, 37, or 38. And so my thought was, you know what? I don't need the system. Let's be a little crazy. Let's just go all the way to 38. Let's go from 35 to 38 in one go. Let's just see what happens. And so that's what I did. One command, it was a series of about 5 commands, but one command was the one that dropped the hammer, and it basically said, all right, upgrade the system to Fedora 38 and go. And there was about 2.7 gigs of junk that I had to download. And honestly, it pretty much just took the old system, threw it away, and installed a whole entire new system on top of that, leaving, my home folder, those subvolumes alone is essentially all it did. I rebooted. It had a little extra to do, rebooted again, and now I'm on Fedora 38 with GNOME 44. I think I was on 41, and so it went from GNOME 41 to GNOME 44, and all of the tooling that goes with that. And it did not hiccup once. Not one time did I get any kind of error or mishap or anything.
I don't think you'd have been able to do that with Arch.
Well, no, exactly right. But I think Fedora cares a little bit more instead of just saying, here are your packages. Fedora does testing, and they do the upgrade testing. I don't know that they do Fedora 35 to Fedora 38 upgrade testing, but I did, and it worked extremely well. And when I'm hearing the definition of an immutable system, when I'm looking at vanilla OS, when I'm looking at Silverblue, when I'm looking at all of the different options that you have for immutability, that is the problem they're trying to solve. It doesn't matter how far ahead or behind you move, the system is stable and you know it will be stable and you will boot into it. That is the problem. And I just don't know what kinds of systems break in an upgrade like that. I don't make a whole lot of changes. I don't go under. There was a system change that I had to refigure out how to do, which was in Pulse Audio. It kills my what is the word? So basically, there's a sync and it turns off my audio, like to save power after three seconds or something like that. And you hear an audible pop, and for some reason there's line noise. So I'm like, well, I don't want that. So in Pulse Audio, I go in and basically tell it not to do that. Well, the WireGuard switch happened between Fedora 38 and 35. So now I have to go figure out how to deal with that in WireGuard. And you were mentioning, Norbert, that the immutable system stuff is in USR. So I would have to figure out how to deal with that because that's where the WireGuard. Well, I keep saying WireGuard. What is
Pipewire?
Pipewire. That's
Yeah.
what I've been meaning this entire time, not WireGuard. So Pipewire, the configuration file that allowed me to make that change is in USR. So I'd have to figure out how to jank with an immutable system to be able to make that change. Whereas Pulse Audio, that stuff was in Etsy. So I don't know if, at least in Silverblue, I don't know if that would have been a change I'd need to figure that out with. But anyway, I didn't have any problems going from such an old system to such a new system. And so I don't know. I don't know if I'm fully on board with this immutable thing. I think it's cool, especially because that's kind of what our phones and Mac OS has been doing for a very, very long time. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate the stability that will bring. But I think traditional systems have come a whole long way as far as stability goes. And Fedora 35 to 38 kind of seals it for me.
Yeah,
I don't
would
know
have to agree.
how much I'm chomping at the bit to move to an immutable system. And so that's kind of where the question of when do you think is this going to be by default? Because that's when I will change, I suppose.
I would say maybe 4 to 5 years from now it might start happening.
Yeah.
And I guess it makes sense that Fedora 35 offered you to update to 37 because each release has a 13-month support period. So you can either upgrade every 6 months or you can upgrade every 12 months and skip every other release.
Right.
So that way, right before 35 went end of life, 37 was the latest one.
Right.
So I guess they just left it in Ingram software.
And that makes perfect sense. And it seemed to me to be the safe option, but I didn't want to go with the safe option. I actually did want to shake the tree and see what fell out, and nothing. Fedora 38 is working great.
Next time you should increment it. You should try to, if there's a way to install 35 still, you should maybe wait for 39 or 40 to come out and try to jump 5 releases in one.
The only reason that I think it did work is because the 35 repos are still alive even after 35 is end of life. I don't know when they're going to turn those off. And when they turn those off, that I think will probably be the death knell for whatever version of old Fedora you're on. When those repos are gone, that's really it.
Do you really need those repos? Because if you keep updating your system until they are
my problem was that I didn't. I was not keeping up with the updates. It was months behind.
Yeah,
I stopped using it in October. End of life was in December of 2022, right? Yeah. And then but it wasn't until May now that I did the upgrade. So I was not keeping up with updates. I was at least 2 months behind, and I can't guarantee that I ran updates the last time I ran that Fedora box.
I really like 35. I was on 35 for a very long time on my tablet because 36 had some interesting bugs when it came to GNOME on a touch screen.
Yeah.
But I'm starting to think that maybe that was because I just decided to not use the Surface kernel. I just used the regular kernel, which worked for a while. And at one point, GNOME started after an update behaving weird. But when I switched to the Surface kernel, it just worked fine. I just want to give a shout out randomly to Nobara Linux, which, as far as I know, I use this phrase a lot, but I'm not sure. But as far as I know, that they have a bunch of patches in their custom kernel, including the Surface patches. So if someone has a Surface laptop or a Surface tablet, and they don't want to have to worry about the custom kernel, maybe Nobara is a good choice.
Cool.
And but the main reason I started thinking about this is I have the tablet, I have the laptop, I have my server, and I have my desktop. I have 4 devices running Linux. Of these, the tablet is one that I use the least. I just do a weekly upgrade on my server, which has Linux OS. I do multiple updates on my laptop, but sometimes when I just go days without not using my desktop, which happens, I only use it when I need some graphical acceleration. And sometimes I would just boot it up just to do an upgrade and then shut it down. Because I want to keep up with updates. And because I have this system where it doesn't upgrade my current system state, it pulls down a new system state and reapplies my changes if I have packages. I decided to not layer anything because I want to get the most out of this model. I don't have to worry about updates model because it just does all the package management on the cloud on the server side, and it just mirrors the changes. And that's why I decided to go immutable, so I have to worry about updates on 2 devices only instead of 3.
That's pretty cool. Well, I have another question that isn't in regards to updating or immutability. So I've been dealing with a whole lot of churn. I have a hypervisor. It runs off ESXi, so VMware, and I run, I don't know, what is it, like five VMs, but one of them has a Mate desktop on it, and I like the ability in ESXi to be able to log into the web interface and directly manipulate that machine. Right, drag and drop and stuff like that.
Oh,
but
can Proxmox do that? Drag and drop?
Okay, I'm getting there. But the thing that ESXi has spoiled me on is the fact that it is very close to desktop native performance, and this is in a web browser. So because I'm spoiled on that, I kind of expect that now. But on the same coin, I really want to get away from using the proprietary VMware in the first place, right? But I want to keep the things that it spoiled me on. So I tried Proxmox, and it seems to be close. It uses no VNC in the browser, which is not desktop anywhere close to it. It is tarry and janky, and I don't like it. But you do have the ability to use Spice. However, not in the browser. You have to install Vert Viewer on Linux and on Windows, and there is no official native package for Vert Viewer on Mac. And I think I've said this on this show before. Otherwise, you can send your email to, what is it?
show@linuxotc.org.
Because I'm about to tell you that I use all 3 operating systems on a very regular basis. Linux here now. I use a little bit of Windows for gaming, and I use Mac for the insane battery life.
Go ahead and put Leo's name in the subject line.
Go ahead.
All of your hate mail.
You're using Windows for gaming on a hypervisor.
No.
Oh, okay,
Native Windows on a desktop.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't do the pass-through thing. I'm not trying to buy a second video card just to do something. No. I will just use Windows. But
I guess you could just make specific. You could set up game streaming, self-host game streaming, where you run the game at home and you just stream it to a laptop somewhere else and just have the controller.
Ooh, and the cool thing about that is that it's supported on all 3. So I just need a Windows desktop in a corner to be able to do that. So anyway, so the idea is I want to be able to log into this hypervisor from any platform. I don't care what it is, phone included. Without having to compromise. So with Proxmox, I have to compromise already. I can't just say open in new tab or open in browser, new browser window or whatever, and it just pop up and say, all right, here's your desktop. I can't do that with Proxmox. If I'm using Spice, which does give me performance that is one-to-one with what ESXi has given me, I have to use Vert Viewer, which requires me to install software on every machine I want to be able to access this VM with. That is not what I want, but if I have to compromise and do that, I guess I will. Because there are builds of Vert Viewer on Mac, so it's not a big deal. But I decided, why not just try them all? Let's just figure out what's out there. And so XCP-NG is another option, which uses Zen. So this is the same thing as Citrix Zen Server, but it's a community fork, and you use Zen Orchestra. The downside of this, I don't see any way to use Spice in the browser at all. But VNC performance is slightly better in XCP-NG for some reason. I don't know why.
That's because you're a Mate and not cinnamon.
Well, no. It's mate all across. So there's no difference.
That's what I mean. You can only have spices on cinnamon.
Ah, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's it.
Get him out of here.
But so I'm using that, and it's good, except for the fact that it doesn't give you a web interface from the get-go. It's only command line. So you have to either compile the web interface for yourself or download a community compiled version that exists on top of a pre-made Debian VM, which runs off 4 gigs of memory. Long story short, to be able to run a web interface in XCP-NG, you have to sacrifice 4 gigs of your hypervisor or use a totally separate machine to run the web interface. No. I only have 16 gigs in this machine, and dedicating a quarter of it just to run the web interface, not so much. I don't like it. Not to mention that the Debian VM kind of crashed a couple times. I had to reboot it to be able to. No, it's too much jank. So my next stop is just remove all the complexity and install Cockpit on top of a Red Hat clone or a Debian and KVM.
I was about to mention Cockpit.
Because I have read, and I don't know for sure, but Cockpit supports Spice in browser. If that is true, that might be the winner. It might have to be the winner because I don't need anything special on the VM side. I just need it to be fast on the user side. So
does that mean you can grab a file on your host desktop, drag it into the browser, and put it in the VM desktop?
I don't think so. That would be actually, I didn't even think about that. I didn't think of that as a use case for me because I've got SSHFS pointing to all different kinds of stuff. So I mean, I can drag and drop it onto a folder in my own desktop and it'll show up over there. So I don't need that, but it is cool. That would be cool if it was a thing. So I guess all that to say, Norbert, Bill, do y'all have any opinions? But even further than that, does anybody listening have any opinions?
That's what I was going to say. I'd be interested. We'd be interested to know your opinion, or if you have any experience with immutable desktop systems. You know, show at I about said 3FT podcast. Show at linuxotc.org. Let us know what you think, or just comment directly on the website. We do have a bit of feedback that we probably ought to get to.
Oh, hey.
And this is from Phil S. He wrote on May 6th, greetings, everyone. I've been listening to your show since the beginning, and while I was uncertain of it at the start, it has really grown on me, and I enjoy the discussions you have. Thanks for your efforts. Well, thank you. I thought you'd appreciate some feedback. Here's how I get your show. Now pay attention.
Uh-oh.
I download the show when it pops up in the RSS feed, which I get via Thunderbird. Once downloaded, it's copied to my phone, which I play in my car via Bluetooth while driving to and from work, which is where I mostly listen to my podcasts. Nothing unusual about that. I have trouble with the audio levels. The music is quite loud compared to the rest of the content. However, it's fine as I can turn the volume back up after it's done. The three voices are at different levels, with Leo being the quietest and Norbert being the loudest. Bill's is pretty much the middle of the other two. It appears to be more noticeable in my car environments as I have road noise to contend with, which exacerbates the issue for me. I listened to a bit of the latest podcast on my PC with headphones, and it's not as pronounced as it is in the car. Anyway, I thought the feedback may be useful and shows there are many different environments people consume their podcasts.
Uh-huh.
And then
So-
he
Oh, go ahead.
well, I think in the beginning, we were struggling with the audio issues a little bit more because the theme music was way louder, and then I kind of worked that problem out. And but he's just downloading the file and playing it raw with no compression whatsoever. He's not using a podcast player. I think he's just using VLC to
But
play the
do-
MP3.
Right, but the raw MP3 should be level.
It should be fine.
Yeah.
One problem I do sometimes have a little bit of problem bringing your audio up to the same level as ours.
See, and I asked you on the very first episode, do you want me to do that for you? And you told me no. You told me no.
I mean, if you could get it out by 11:45 on Sunday night, yeah, sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, I would just do it right here and then ship it to you. But
Okay.
I know how I am when audio comes to me. I do not want anybody to touch it. So I totally respect that decision.
Yeah, I mean,
just simply because don't touch it. I will touch it.
I
know what I'm
suppose
doing.
if I was being honest, yeah, there was a little bit of a control freak attitude on my
I totally
my
get
part.
that. Don't.
Yeah.
I understand.
I think all of us share some of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reason we use Linux is because we like to be in control of our tools.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And I think the main what's the word takeaway of today's episode is that immutable systems don't take away all your control. That you can still have most of that, but it's just moved away from your system to the cloud if you want to build
Well,
your
the last thing I
image.
want to say about that is that if I'm going to run an immutable system, I don't want to make those changes
Yeah,
at
that's
all.
fair.
Like the
That's
whole
fair.
point is that if I want this machine or system or whatever device to just keep running on into perpetuity, I will not dig down and make those changes so that I don't run into issues with updating. But
But you're saying that if you want maximum stability, you will just use their stock images. But
Yeah.
does that mean that if you want your computer to run forever, that you are more likely to use an immutable system than a regular one?
no, not really. But I think once it becomes default, right? Like I'll be happy to do it. But no, I make hardware decisions totally based on the longevity of a particular system. It's the entire reason I got a framework that does not have an NVIDIA card in it. Like there's a big reason why. Well, yeah, ever since I guess it was 2018 or so, I made the decision to just not buy anything that doesn't support what I want, and or if the support is on the horizon, I'll still go ahead and buy that and just wait for the support to land, whatever that is. I'm currently waiting on fractional scaling, right? It's been on the horizon for a little while, but still, that's a big thing, right? I make my hardware purchases with Linux in mind.
Ooh, I still haven't crossed that bridge. I'm still on
Yeah.
1080p everywhere. I
1080p on 14 inches, 100% needs 125% scaling.
Does
so I think so. I think here's a controversial opinion right here. Here's a hot take. I think 13 and 14 inch screens look best at the equivalent of 1600 by 900 in that area, that amount of screen real estate. So double that or 150% that or whatever that is for whatever kind of scaling you want to, whatever. But that amount of screen real estate is perfect for a device like that for most people.
I just don't like a screen that small
Yeah.
because
Oh, I get that.
It's my since I started using more and more workspaces, I'm perfectly fine with the 14 inches. That's what I'm using. But I'm also pretty content with leaving it at 100%. But I very probably will get at least a 1440p desktop monitor, because my desktop monitor is also 1080p. So when that happens, I will have to see whether I want to do any sort of scaling.
Well,
If
Phil,
I do, maybe that will be what pushes me to try to daily drive Plasma. And at that point, I will just have to do a single command, something like sudo rpm ostree rebase and then the Kinoite image, and it just changes. It's like switching to a different Git branch.
from Silverblue to Kinoite?
Yep, and you can
Yeah,
just do the
it's
same.
just
Oh, I
gnome
hadn't
to-
even considered that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
gnome to plasma.
that's
essentially.
one of the biggest selling point of. Well, it's free, but it's one of the biggest things that they advertise Ublue with, is that if you have a custom image or in the image, you can just do a one-liner edit rebases your system to the other image, and it leaves your users settings intact. It leaves your modified files in /etc, I think, or yeah, and as well as everything in your home directory. So that's your flatpaks and stuff, because all the flatpaks go into your home directory.
Well, I want to get through this feedback before we get out of
sorry.
here. He went on to write ads, : as you were tossing it around the table, I thought you'd be interested to know that the ads are of local content and not necessarily tech related. In my case, they weren't. I got 2 ads in the last podcast, episode 8, and the first one appeared at the 31-minute mark. It was the West Australian Police Force recruiting ad. And the spooky part was I was driving past a police station when it came on. I nearly turned the car over and was reaching for my tinfoil hat at that time. I was thinking, WTF did that come from? The second ad came from stationary/tech chain, which was from a stationary/tech chain, which was played right at the end of the podcast. FWIW. What is that? FWIW.
For what it's worth.
For what it's worth, I live in Perth, Western Australia. Well, you were playing it on your phone, and your phone, it knows everything you do, where you're at, and
Well, the MP3 wouldn't, right? Because he downloaded it on the desktop and through Thunderbird,
okay.
and then he moves it to his phone. So it's very much IP location based, which
Yeah.
is why he got those ads. But but it is
does it-
still weird, man. A cop ad while passing the station.
As far as I can address when I set up the ad platform, it's got some categories that you can, and I did put it into a general tech category, understanding full well that it probably wasn't going to be the niche tech category that we're used to hearing, like on Jupiter Broadcasting and Destination Linux and shows like that. It just wasn't that. Normal people don't go out looking for those kind of ads, I guess. I don't know, but I'm not completely convinced that I'm going to remain with that turned on. It's not bringing in even enough money to pay for the service that hosts our files, let alone, make any money for the show. So
I was going to ask if it's opt out, because when you said that it
Yeah.
turned it on, I assumed that it was mandatory. But if it's not,
No, it's not mandatory, but I was interested to see what we could accumulate. And right as it seems right now, I'll come right out and say it. It's between $2 and $3 a month, which is hardly worth. It's certainly not worth irritating our listeners for. and I will not do that. If and
Are,
please,
are the ads of consistent length?
yeah. I
Oh
mean, they're
yeah.
just
See,
kind of normal. They're the kind of ads that you would expect to hear, like uh, on a news show, like a national chain news show podcast or something like that. Like in
yeah.
here in the
I what I
States, you
what I need from everybody listening that doesn't like ads, which should probably be all of you, is just knowing we got to figure out when the ads drop normally, and how long they normally are, and then in the recording we need to just say, all right, get your fingers ready, hit the
see,
30-second forward button in a minute.
yeah. What Here's how it works. So when I upload the MP3 to Red Circle, it does some processing and then it gives me a waveform, and then it shows uh, 5 places where the ads are. You got 2 in the what they call the pre-roll, 2 in the post-roll, which means after the ending. And these all pay differently. Obviously, the one at the end is going to pay the least because almost nobody even probably listens to the entire theme music, let alone let it play through the ad at the end of that. You got a pre-roll, and they're only. I mean, I don't think they're even 30 seconds long, and you'll have 2 at the pre-roll, and then what it does is I can move these dynamically, and then you've got a mid-roll, and that's the one you usually have to get in there and find a place where it's appropriate to kind of
So
butt
you
in.
know the exact spot.
I know the spot. I don't know what the ad's going to be because it's
Right,
dynamic.
Right.
Obviously, nobody outside of Australia is going to get a Australian police force recruiting ad. That is actually that's interesting that they've got that kind of.
Unless you log into Red Circle to download the MP3 over a VPN that is in Perth, Australia.
That
in
sounds
which
like
case,
fun.
Just go
And
check out the
that's-
ads over there.
That's how I got German ads at one point, where I forgot my VPN on.
Yeah.
And ich spreche keine Deutsche.
Yeah, well,
Ich spreche Deutsche nicht. I'm not sure which one is the more correct.
the first one was that you speak a little German. The second one is that you don't speak any German.
No, I said either ich spreche keine Deutsche or ich spreche Deutsche nicht.
Kleine is a little bit.
Keine. No, keine.
Kinda is a little bit.
No, that's kleine. Keine is none, I think.
Oh, okay.
It's
So
all Greek to me, man.
what I would want to know. Okay, so if these ads are irritating people to the point where you're just wanting to rage quit Linux OTC, I will stop
No,
immediately.
I'm gonna put more ads. I just want to see what happens.
I mean, because I'm never gonna. I mean,
That clears the ads from the previous episodes retroactively, right? As well.
yeah, it's either on or it's not. And
Okay.
it gets no matter what episode number, it just kind of gets placed on
Yeah,
there.
then I'm also in favor of turning them off.
Okay. So
I'm in favor of ads every 5 minutes.
every 5 minutes, because
Yeah.
I can do that. I can
Can
dynamically.
you really?
You can
God.
dynamically
Okay,
insert
that was a joke.
as many
Don't
as you
do that.
want.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
wow.
absolutely understand people who don't like ads, because since I've started using YouTube Premium, my level of tolerance for ads, any sort of ads, just decreased substantially.
This is a discussion for the next episode because
Okay.
this is the exact problem that open source developers say that they
Yes.
have. And it's not just that they say that they have it, it's that we know that they have it. The developer for OpenSSL, it broke the internet. And then everybody was like, oh, maybe we should pay the guy
Yeah.
that is quite literally holding up the encryption of the internet on his own 2 shoulders by himself. Maybe we should pay him. And it was at the time lower than a living wage. So
I am picturing the Greek,
maybe.
I'm picturing the Greek mythological figure Atlas holding up the entire world.
Well,
except
he
except it's
seriously,
internet.
Yeah, he was holding up the whole World Wide Web, right, by himself. Seriously, like bank websites were relying on this guy's altruism to protect everyday transactions, and only after it broke were we like, oh, I guess it's integral to the internet. Maybe
That-
we should
I
hire
mean,
the guy.
I would like to get into that on a future episode too,
Yeah,
because
so-
that it is huge.
But it will
So,
get into the topic. You have to get into the topic of how, if this is content that people actually like and want more of and stuff like that. Do we get paid? Do we deserve money
Right, 'cause,
for what we do?
well,
or is this just one of those things where it's just a bunch of nerds talking together and we don't deserve anything because we're just opinionated jerks?
Well,
I mean,
If I-
our domain name's not free. Our email is not free. We use Proton for our email. That's not
But another
free.
question is, do we even provide value?
Okay.
See, but these are questions we gotta wait. We gotta sit on these and think on these. Talk about it in the next episode or future episode.
Right. That's why it was all about the ads, because my only goal with the ads was to try to recoup just the and it's not a lot of money, but it's a non-zero number, of money that's going into the few things that we are paying for, like the hosting service, and then the email, and then the domain name, and and it all adds up to maybe $50 a year at the most, but that's a non-zero number. I really, if I could get away with the ads without upsetting people to the point where they're leaving the show, then I was fine with that. But I like we said before, let us know what you think about that. I genuinely want to do what is best for the audience, and
I genuinely want to do the opposite.
Leo hates you, and so anything you tell me to do, Leo
I
will do
be
the
in
opposite.
favor of the opposite. Yes.
Oh, we better get out of here then. Why don't we go ahead and say
Bill is in favor of Linux.
I am in favor
Oh,
of
I'm
Linux.
in favor of Linux.
Linux forever. It's all I have. Hey, real quick, where can we get a hold of you guys? Some emails, some socials. How about you, Leo?
I'm on the internet, leochavez.org. I got Leo at as well if you want to email me that domain. And then I'm on Mastodon. So mastodon.social. What is it? What is Leo Chavez? Yeah, at mastodon.social.
Yeah. How about you, Norbert?
I'm not too big on social media. As far
I can't
as
stand social media.
yeah, I am on Mastodon, so it's odoben@c.im, and that's the letter C, so it's odoben at odoben@c.im. I'll try to go for a short one, but I don't post or boost much.
I don't. I think Mastodon would have to make a lot of mistakes for me to be against them. It's like the one thing I do like, and I haven't tried like Matrix or anything like that. But Mastodon's the one thing that if I've got to use social media at all, that I think Mastodon would be the thing. And you can get a hold of me on there. I'm at wchauser3@fosstodon.org.
And you say if you have to, but do you have to? That's
Not
the
really.
other question.
I mean,
Is it bad to be on Twitter, or is that real
I mean,
bad?
I've got it on my phone, and
Yeah,
I
how
think
dare you, Bill? How dare you be on
because
Twitter?
I get stuff from you on there. I mean,
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm on Twitter, man.
and I've still got people that have not they've not rage quit yet, and so I don't want to miss the things that. There have been some people like George Castro, for example. I've not seen him tweet in a long time. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I think
he's over on Mastodon now.
Yeah, I think he's completely on Mastodon. But on the other hand, you've got people from 2.5 admins are still using without naming names.
Well, I mean, Twitter is Windows and Mastodon is Linux, and that is how it's split. I think there are a whole lot of people that have adopted it that aren't, Linuxy inclined kind of folks. Journalism and stuff like that, arts, a lot of that. But yeah, I mean, it's the alternative. It seems to be. We'll see what happens with Blue Sky.
Is it just that
right?
we think it's better because it's the open source
Well, I
alternative?
think a lot of people think it's better because it's not Twitter.
Yeah.
What I'm wondering is what the barrier of entry is for other platforms to join the Fediverse, because I know there are talks of Tumblr potentially integrating ActivityPub, and some other platforms. So
PixelFed
I,
does it.
yeah, yes,
Tilvids
but
does it.
PixelFed was designed to be in the Fediverse from beginning, but Tumblr isn't, and they
Oh, I remember
want
that
to
conversation.
they want to integrate into Fediverse. So what existing non-federated platforms could or would integrate with ActivityPub is
I
what I'm
see.
I wonder
because
if it
if that
needs to be something
happens,
that can be
then
self-hosted, and
yeah,
then
because if sites like Tumblr join in and they lower the barrier of entry for people to start using the Fediverse, so then that might increase the discoverability of accounts and people on things like Mastodon.
Yeah, I just see if Tumblr's going to join, I just see it being, at somebody at tumblr.com. They're just going to be a part.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because you can use the one account that you have on any part of ActivityPub and then use that on the rest of ActivityPub, which is really cool. Like I have people that follow Linux user space or whatever, and I'll get a notification through Tilvids, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, you can do that. So it is really cool that that you can do that, and once you're in the whole thing. So yeah.
Well, that all being said, we'll be back in 2 weeks with more of this fantastic excitement. Until then, I've been Bill.
Oh, I've been Norbert.
I'm still Leo.
Have a good one, folks.